Nothing has changed. In other words, the facts didn't change. And by the way, when the recording is examined closely, as we will do at trial, when it's picked apart, you'll see, without cherry picking, that it exonerates Mr. Adelson. That's what you'll see from the recording.
So we know that Daniel Rashbaum is going to attack the Dolce Vita recording the best ways he can. Now, I've reviewed the Dolce Vita transcript several times now from Charlie's perspective, and I have to be honest, I've had some difficulty coming up with ways that I think Charlie's defense can address some of these damaging statements. But I managed, and we're going to go through that today. I personally don't see how anyone could say that this recording exonerates Charlie or anyone else, but I digress. So taking a step back more generally, I think Charlie's defense strategy is going to be fairly straightforward. Charlie had nothing to do with the murder, and the state failed to prove the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think it's going to be anything elaborate, particularly given that much of what is on Charlie's exhibit and witness lists are similar to what's on the state's. Now, the Dolce Vita recording, in case you're not aware, is an FBI audio and video recording of a meeting between Charlie Adelson and Catherine Magbanua. Now, the Dolce Vita conversation occurred on April 20th, 2016, which was the same afternoon that Charlie met in person with Donna to discuss the bump. And it was the day before was when the bump occurred. Now, it's referred to as the Dolce Vita recording because that was the name of the small strip mall restaurant where the meeting between Charlie and Katie took place. I actually, in one of my traveling periodontist tours, I actually went to the restaurant, and so I'll link that up here in case you want to check it out. Now, in Charlie's bond hearing last September, Rashbaum argued that Charlie repeatedly said he had nothing to do with the murder in the Dolce Vita recording, a recording that Rashbaum called the state's best piece of evidence. Rashbaum added that he thinks Charlie actually says he had nothing to do with the murder a couple of more times in unintelligible parts of the recording, which Rashbaum said they were working on making intelligible. Now, of course, we don't know if the defense actually undertook that work, but what we do know is that there's nothing indicating there's a, quote, defense-enhanced version of Dolce Vita on the defense exhibit list. Now, as I discussed in my prior videos on the bump and the wiretaps, the theme is one of two scenarios is intertwined in a good number of those communications. Now, how would we characterize one of two scenarios from Charlie's perspective? So let's say scenario one is that it's law enforcement. So his perspective could be, yes, of course he thought it might be law enforcement and the cops sniffing around trying to pin it on the Adelsons, because at this time they don't have any arrests. They just have persons of interests. And the Adelsons, of course, are obvious persons of interests. Now in scenario two is whether it's a gang member trying to shake down the Adelsons for money, then I think Charlie could make a similar argument. It's some shady gangster that's connected to Katie's baby daddy, Sigfredo, who Charlie knows is dangerous, apparently from his prior dating relationship with Katie. And the murder had been reported in the media, right? Charlie even mentions that this had been on BBC World News, it had been on Good Morning America, it had been on the New York Times. So it was a big story. So someone who knew that Katie and Charlie dated and then also knew about this story could then just be trying to shake down the Adelsons for money under this kind of thug theory. So with those perspectives in mind, let's go ahead and go over some of the significant statements in the Dolce Vita recording. Okay, we got to start with the best one, right? If they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. Now, we heard Rashbaum's explanation of this damaging statement in that bond hearing. First, he argued that you can't even hear what preceded that statement. And in fact, you can't even not just hear what they were saying right before Charlie said that, but you can't hear what happened 30 minutes before. And remember, the defense is going to get an instruction on this fact, the fact that the FBI does not have any intelligible audio from that first 30 minutes. The other thing I think Charlie will try to argue is that it's not evidence of guilt or a desire to flee because, he never did flee. And so much time had gone on between, the 2014 murder, the 2016 bump, and 2022 when he was finally arrested. And so, he didn't flee because he's innocent. And he's saying there's no evidence because he had nothing to do with this. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's a winning argument, but I think that's kind of where they're going to have to go with that one. Listen, if a badge comes up to you, tell them, "Have a nice day, officer." Listen, if they want to charge me with something, charge me. If not, I don't talk to cops. Sorry. And then he goes on to say, it's very simple. If you're going to charge me, charge me. I think here that Charlie's defense is going to say, look, this is a positive statement. See, I've got nothing to do with this. I'm not guilty. I even said, hey, go ahead and charge me. I'm not afraid. Next part of the Dolce Vita recording that I think will take some explanation is portions that Georgia actually brought up in that bond hearing. And the way she described it was the conversations were Charlie and Katie discussing the quality and the implications of evidence that were involved in the case. So let me get to what I mean. So these are statements like, you've got to understand, in order to prove it, you have to put that person at the scene of the crime. Not just in the car, not just because DNA is in the car. And here he was referring to a Burger King robbery hypothetical. So I think the argument here would be, just because my family is implicated by virtue of Dan being Wendy's ex-husband doesn't mean that you've proved the crime. It's just insinuation. And he continues with this analogy later when he says to Katie, say you rented a car. You've been in the car. But then I borrow it and I drive to Orlando and rob a McDonald's there. He sure likes those fast food robbery hypotheticals, doesn't he? Or even better, I just take the car without you even knowing and borrow it and go do this robbery in Orlando at the McDonald's. Now, right after this, Charlie says, my point is, I don't have any knowledge of what went on. Evidently, this person is pretending to or does, but I don't want someone paying visits to my parents. So I think the argument on this is going to be, I don't know what happened with Dan's murder, what went on. This person that approached my mom either is pretending to know something that happened in Dan's murder, or he does know. And so that's Charlie acknowledging that the person, the undercover, may actually know what happened with Dan, which is scary. And for that reason, he doesn't want the scary person bothering his parents. The other point of the fast food robbery analogy was to show that everything is rumors. The police don't have any evidence. And guess what? I'm innocent. He even later says, look, go talk to the person who's involved. And I'm not involved. Now, I don't think this is really a winning argument because what he says after that, he goes on to say that the undercover should have approached him, not his mom or dad. And indeed, he said, they needed to talk with someone who knows what the F went on. I'm not sure how the defense explains that. What do you guys think? Okay, another problematic statements from the Dolce Vita recording are the references to the money drop. So this is where Charlie says, let me ask you a question. When everyone was there that next day, did any of you take any money? It's not like you're driving around in a Bentley, cruising around in a mega yacht. And Charlie goes on to say, he must at some point, because otherwise he would have no idea that I had anything to do with. Guys, I don't have really anything for this one. I just can't think of an innocent explanation for the money drop comments. I mean, the first part is damaging. Maybe the second part where he says, maybe that last part of that sentence ended with you. In other words, Katie, the undercover would have no idea that Charlie had anything to do with Katie, that he dated her. I don't know. I still think it's problematic. What do you guys think? Can you think of any innocent explanations for the money drop statement? Let me know in the comments below. The next statement is where Charlie is hypothesizing that this could be an undercover police operation. And when he says is, so if you didn't witness it, you only heard a rumor on the street that this person did something. Do you know what that's worth? 0. Then what you do is you wear a wire. You get this person talking, and if you can get the person to confess on wire, then you have something that you're charging. You have a confession. You have an admission of guilt. Now, I think the defense can say, yeah, he thought one of the possibilities could be that the bump was a law enforcement trying to shake out information on a stale case. And again, the Adelsons are one of their persons of interest. And so he could say this statement just shows Charlie explaining to Katie that this could be one of 2 scenarios. And the fact that he knows he's talking about being wiretapped and he still is freely talking to Katie shows he isn't concerned about it being an investigation because he knows he's innocent. Similar statement along those lines is this one. And if they thought I had something to do with it, they would find me and talk to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, talk to the person who's involved, not effing people who aren't involved. And I'm not involved. But if they knew our relationship, your relationship was with me, not my family. So, argument. Again, this is Charlie referring to the scenario that this could be someone related to Katie and Sigfredo trying to shake down the Adelsons for money. And him saying, talk to the person who's involved, meaning Charlie, is because he's the one that dated Katie, not his family. But of course, he's not involved, meaning the murder. But if they knew our relationship, that relationship was with me, not my family, that could be him saying, well, if it was a thug connection, they should know it's me and not my mom and dad. So maybe it is an FBI undercover sting. So the next statement relates to Charlie talking about Katie working for the Adelson Institute. And I think this might be one where the defense tries to show that it was innocent. She was working for the Adelson Institute and it had nothing to do with payments for the murder for hire. So Charlie was talking about Katie's connection to the Adelsons, being Charlie, and he says, like, yeah, you work for the office now because the checks are from there. And that's just because you come in and you work on the weekends, which I trust you're doing because I'm never there when I see you. You tell me you do it and the place looks clean. So you get your checks, you clean up, whatever. So again, the argument, Katie's job was legitimate. She did work after hours cleaning up the office. And hey, I didn't know she was swindling me and not coming to the office on the weekends to clean. And, because remember, the law enforcement was watching Katie for about 6 months or so before the bump. and they didn't see her going to the Adelson Institute. So that could be his argument. Look, I wasn't checking up on her. She said she cleaned. I trusted she did it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Now, here's one I think that Charlie's going to try to argue this is something that shows his innocence and that he wasn't involved. And again, it's still discussing the two scenarios. And he said, if it's a cop, I'm happy because I've got nothing to hide, okay? And then shortly thereafter, he talks more about that scenario of being the cops. And he says, well, prove it. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. And then he references pictures, I guess he has on his phone that wouldn't be, kid friendly. And he continues, if you think I did something, arrest me, charge me. And that's it. That's it. If they're the cops, I'm happy because I've got nothing to hide. So again, I think that's going to be some of these examples that Rashbaum's going to bring in to show he's saying on this Dolce Vita recording, he's not involved. And so therefore, this great piece of evidence the state has is a nothing burger. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, if you could like the video, that would be really awesome. It really helps me with growing the channel. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go on to the next statement. And this is where Charlie is instructing Katie on how to deal with the undercover. So Charlie's talking with Katie about whether to give the money, the $5,000, and the problem of having the person or others, due to the thug singing, coming back for more and more money. And he tells Katie he'd give her the money, but she'll talk to the undercover on the phone. And this is going to be the story. The story is that one of Katie's friends called her about this person, this undercover, reaching out to them, and that the undercover mentioned Katie's name. And so that's why she's presumably calling this number. And Katie is to say that these people, meaning the Adelsons, want to go to the police because they had nothing to do with what you're talking about. And frankly, I, Katie, don't know what you're talking about either. But the name Tuto sounds familiar, so I'm going to give you the money as charity, a one-time thing. But you can't contact these people again or they're going to the police. And Charlie goes on to say, that way the undercover gets his money, but that Katie is on to him and that Sigfredo might not be cool with this, like it's a threat. So I think here the argument would be, this is consistent with Charlie trying to figure out if it's someone related to Katie and Sigfredo trying to shake him down for money because they know he's wealthy, his family is wealthy, they're people of interest because of the media, right? And he dated Katie under this thug scenario. And he also reiterates that they don't know what they're talking about, right? This profession of innocence. Now, I think it's interesting that Charlie says, if this is the guy, maybe in the back of he knows something times a million. And now he's effing with his wife and he's effing with him. And you F with him and you F with the king himself. You better kill him because he's going to be a big problem and he knows who you are. Does Charlie think that Katie's baby daddy, Sigfredo, is the king of the Latin kings? I don't know, that confused me. But he goes on to say, if he can't do it, he'll have someone else do it. And so help me God, if they F with my family, it's going to be like effing Nazi SH, you know what? Because this will be done. You know what? I guess he could say when he's saying, if they F with my family, he doesn't mean himself. He's referring to Sigfredo effing with his family. And that this last part of the conversation is just him continuing to role playing about like what Sigfredo would say, to kind of send a message to this person, this thug, that this is a one-time thing and there's this really dangerous person that's involved in the background and you better not mess with them. I think it's maybe a stretch, particularly when you consider what follows, because he says after that, Katie, I don't care what I spend, okay? I swear to God. The next part that I think Charlie is going to have an explanation for are his references to what he does for Katie. And what he says here is, I don't even have to. I don't have to sit here and tell you what I would do. I show you what I do. You know how I am. I look for things to do. You don't ask me for SHIT. I'm the one that's like, hey, somebody's birthday's coming up. I got you. I sell you a Lexus for a very good price. I know you're having car problems. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have to tell you. I show you. There's a difference. I guess he could say that this is just an example of him and Katie being really close and good friends, and he's a generous guy, and he likes to help Katie, and he's in a position to do so. Okay, the next statement relates to this being a potential thug extortion scenario. And Charlie says, and the thing is, if my parents were really guilty, they, meaning the thug, may think that they have a big fish on the line that's gonna pay them monthly, and all they have to do is scare this little lady. And who's she going to? She's gonna go to the cops? She's guilty as you know what. And again, reading this from the hypothetical of assuming that they're guilty, that they did something. You have to let them know that these people are not going to be afraid of going to the cops. They've got nothing to hide. So I think that Charlie's just going to say, well, that's a hypothetical. It wasn't saying my parents are guilty. That's not the point. The point is they're not guilty and they've got nothing to hide. The last statement that I think is interesting is where he's discussing the issue of paying the money, but then having every Tom, Dick, and Harry coming back to him on a regular basis for more. And he says, we just got a bunch of scumbags knocking on my door going, somebody needs help. Well, guess what? I don't have anything to do with what happened down there. You don't. I don't know anything. I don't know anyone who does. I don't even know who Tuto effing is, okay? Like, I don't know these people. Then he continues on, go to the effing police. I don't care. Go to the police. Tell them what you know. I'll tell them what I know. Nothing. And again, I think that the argument is going to be, this is just another example of Charlie saying he knows nothing. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's believable when Charlie says, I have no knowledge, I'm not involved, I have nothing to hide? Do you have any additional thoughts on how Charlie's defense will tackle these damaging statements? Do you think it's enough, these arguments, or any arguments you guys come up with to show reasonable doubt? So anyway, tomorrow's the big day. We've got jury selection starting. I think that'll take place for a couple of days in the early part of the week, and then we could get opening statements maybe Wednesday or Thursday. Once opening arguments begin, I'll be providing my thoughts for each day on what occurred. But in the meantime, thank you again for joining me, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.